are going to be inviting Nicole onto the stage. She leads Otherwise. I'm going to put her link here in the chat, which is all about helping people reimagine how we live and collaborate, especially in uncertain times. She also consults through Plenty Enough and advises through Handle Food Law. Nicole, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm so curious to first hear about how you got involved with Otherwise.
Thanks for having me. And thanks for everything you all do with Hylo. It has been such a joy to get to join this community over the last couple of months and then get to nest our community or communities within it. I got involved with Otherwise by founding it. So it was that kind of process, but of course not anything anyone ought to do alone. And so I've had the ability to bring this work to life with a core team of collaborators, two of whom I think are on this call right now, Nissa and Nakasi, and several other folks. Only over the last several months, we opened our doors back in July and brought our community onto Hylo in mid-September. So we're still in the phase of moving folks over and getting everyone oriented here. I guess it is probably useful for me to say a little bit about why it felt necessary to bring Otherwise into being and create this vessel. And for me, it really had to do with having spent the better part of the last 2 decades in and around, one foot in, one foot out of higher education, food systems practice, and really sensing certainly the power of education, but the limits of what is possible in institutions. And institutions that are oriented around the same set of sort of upward mobility dreams and fantasies that pull us up and away from the land, and credentials, and a whole bunch of things that don't seem to make quite as much sense as they once did. And so we were fortunate to be able to experiment with a lot of what we were calling collapse responsive land-based education through a project that was previously existed called EcoGather, and to be able to make a whole bunch of online courses and build community there. But that project has since sunset, and we started to realize that the real power was actually going to be in organizing co-learning in community and facilitating from a place of generative uncertainty. So we all have lots of lived experience and varied kinds of expertise, and many perspectives. And some of us are a little better at sort of holding space and facilitating learning than others, but we're all bringing different gifts. And we now do that outside of an institution, with this idea that cosmolocal collaboration is the necessary companion to bioregional organizing, which is why Hylo was so perfect for us.
I love that. Yes, I really like, I mean, I've never heard this. I feel like you're coining a new term with cosmolocal. I've never heard that name before. So,
I'm not actually, but I'm using it in a different context. And so maybe it's like useful to explain that a little bit. The term comes from the design build space. So if you've heard sort of like design global, build local, that's part of the cosmolocal ethos, small, local, open, connected. And so it's about resisting enclosure and also shortening up supply chains in its original context. But what we think about is doing that with learning and education and figuring out how to help each other make and then sustain, how to hold each other in paradigm shifts, because often when you are really reckoning with metacrisis, polycrisis, great unraveling, whatever you want to call it, whichever flavor of that feels better to you. Sometimes like the people in your local community are not ready to go all the way with you. And so you need a supportive network of folks who are really willing to grapple, willing to get creative, willing to hold and move grief together, to try new things, to share their responses without a sense of necessarily being solutionists, and to do so across the complexities and nuances of their contexts. And so the cosmolocal collaboration is that recognizing though that the way we show up and how we respond needs to fit into our local environments, our local cultures, our bioregions and histories.
Amazing. Wow. Very inspiring. Such important work. So I'm curious to hear a little bit about what's most exciting within otherwise, like within your world, like what is happening at the moment.
Mm. So one of the things that feels really exciting is that my friend Nina Montenegro, who's a beautiful artist with the Far Woods, has a print that says breakdowns can be breakthroughs, and it's all decomposers. And I think we're having a moment of breakdown that can be breakthrough. So I am suddenly sensing that when I describe to people what we do and why, and we say like we are collapse responsive community co-learning organization, I no longer typically get the like reaction and people kind of pulling away and not knowing what that is. People are like, yeah, stuff is kind of coming apart here. So it's a strange thing to be excited about, but the awareness, the increasing acceptance, and the desire to honor the unraveling. And for us, I think one of the things that makes us really distinct is that as we are collapse responsive, we are deeply, deeply committed to entangled liberation. So it's not a prepper response. It's not a stay separate response. Um, and entanglement is a really key concept there. So there's an ontological and epistemological shift. Um, and so we're really involved in trying to figure out how to re-village. I saw some conversations in varied Hylo spaces about this just popping up this week, thinking about what the capacities are, sort of our relational capacities for that, the roles for reworlding, and the practical and providential skills we need to develop for lower energy futures. And it's been very exciting to see how even within our community, folks are sensing the need to do that. In fact, because some of them have been really involved with other groups that are now on Hylo. So we've got loads of fans, for example, of the Great Simplification, who've been really thinking about low energy futures and transitions, who are now prototyping how do we use salvaged solar panels and teach people the basic skills to take the stuff that's going into the landfills instead of being reused, just mined from out of the ground 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and put it to use in community contexts. How do we learn the basic construction skills so that we can salvage windows and doors and buy some lumber from the lumber yard and put a structure together quickly? And so we're simultaneously doing that big paradigm shifting work of hospicing and the practical work of the reskilling, and seeing those two things come together with space for grieving, with space for groups to do sort of really different economic inquiry is a really cool mix. And so I guess I'm really excited about that mix together in one space.
And I also imagine like this transition moving the community to Hylo. So I'm just curious, like now that you've been here for a couple months with the using the platform and the tools, like how have you been using it? What's been useful? What's been maybe challenging? Like just tell us a bit about the experience.
So this transition for us has come along with a real ethos of like intentional digital ethics at the inception of Otherwise. We were starting to make these transitions in our prior project, those of us who caucused there. And this time it was like, we are going to start. We're going to be a completely de-Googled organization. We're going to do a lot of self-hosting. We're going to be very intentional about where our email is and all of these things. And that whole process has come with a lot of like need to get comfortable with a little bit of friction here and there. We're not even on Zoom anymore. We're using a self-hosted instance of MiroTalk, glitchy, but also no surveillance. And so we're also like helping to build the community's capacity and stamina for not letting everything be smooth all the time and recognizing that if it's too easy, like you're probably being extracted from and surveilled. So it has been really useful actually to join at a moment when I can say to people, look, this isn't going to be perfect and flawless, but we have an opportunity to help co-create. what the space is, what the features are, and to encourage people to be in real collaboration. And that feels prefigurative, right? One of our values is that we prefigure what we long for. And so part of that is stepping into the practice with all of you. And the joy has been the receptivity and the responsiveness of your team. But I would say we were like largely organizing on a bunch of signal threads. And what would happen is like a conversation would take off in the big group chat, and then somebody would spin off a subgroup and a subgroup. And that might be fine for a couple of people who were in a few. But as one of the people who was on all of them, it was a nightmare. And then we would lose threads and we'd have like 4 or 5 big, deep conversations going at once, and everyone felt like they were interrupting each other. So the ability to put some sense around all of that, and also to use some of the different features to like move through an arc. So when we're planning and advertising an event, it gets posted, and then we have the event, and then afterwards we can really continue the conversation, share more resources, link a audio or video piece, and do so in different ways. And then we've also hosted a study group in our Entangled Economics child group of Otherwise. And so we started out with that being a closed group of folks just involved in that cohorted study group with tracks and actions and everybody using the space. A small group, maybe 15. And then yesterday, as that came to its conclusion, we were able to open that space up to other folks who now want to come in and join those conversations. So those are a couple of the use cases that we've had so far.
It's so inspiring to hear. I mean, kudos to you, truly. Like you really are you're doing it like in all the ways. It's really amazing to hear. Well, so how can we support you? What's next? Like what do you need?
It's a good question. We need so many things, and we have so much coming next since we're so like young in this form. I think a couple of things that are maybe worth talking about. You know, we have our regular offerings, and they're offered on a gift economy basis. So it's been nice to be able to share those in the Commons. And I'll just take this moment to really invite people to come check it out and show up for another wisdom circle or cycle, which move with the lunar cycles, or check out other gardens if you're more of a land-based permaculturalist. And even this weekend, we have a Tribe of the Dead grief session, seasonally themed. But I'm really excited about the fact that we're working on a learning commons, a digital learning commons, and a glossary of terms. And these two projects are things that are definitely in beta form, right? The initial glossary is built, the learning commons is built. It's beautifully set in original collage art, and we have the ability to click on elements of the collage and link to a gathering guide or a teaching guide on a subject that's within this kind of broad sweep of what we teach and organize around. And what we're really eager to figure out how to do is to support the folks who are in our community in using those gathering guides, using those resources to turn around, like to gather with us online, of course, but then to be able to turn around into their own communities and host a session and not have to reinvent the wheel. And so as I'm thinking about some of the participatory budgeting tools, I can imagine how we can potentially put a resourcing element to that. But I'm also just really like keen to invite folks to join us when we have our kickoff for that, because it will be a first level kickoff. And over the next couple of months, we're definitely going to want to invite a lot of feedback and conversation to think about how to help that mature. And make that like sort of removing many of the enclosed barriers to education. I don't believe this is something people need to go into debt to at this point. That feels really unwise. And then the companion component to that is this glossary, because I feel very strongly that we're not going to be able to describe and guide each other with words only towards the worlds we know in our hearts are possible with the language that has evolved through several centuries of capitalism, through several millennia of empire. And so, yeah, working together to lightly and flexibly hold and play with and use new vocabulary, not in exclusionary and policing way, no carceral logics about using the right or perfect words, but playing with language to describe where we're headed. So I'm hopeful that that's also something we can get going in the spaces among and between groups.
I love that. Is there any links that you want to share, maybe in the chat, if you have an upcoming event or maybe your community on Hylo? Um,
Absolutely.
now is a good time to do that.
Yeah, I'll grab a few. And one thing I'll just ask kind of to draw just some attention to is we have this otherwise is for page on our website. And it's kind of playful and fun. We've come up with these archetypes of folks who we've noticed show up and stick around. And they're all different kinds of sort of character types. So if you read it with a little bit of levity and fun there, you might see yourself reflected in one or more of those.
Oh, this is fun. I love this. Amazing. Wow, Nicole, thank you so much for being with us today. What you're just full of wisdom and insights, and we wish you the best. And we're here. Come back every month. And thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.